Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to Workshop Wednesday and this fireside chat with Intimacy Directors Claire Warden and Teniece Divya Johnson. My name is Rachel Silverman. I'm the Artist Workshop Producer at New York Theater Workshop. We are so happy to have you all here. There's about 130 of us on Zoom and more streaming on Facebook Live, and we're just so happy that everybody has joined us today. This fireside chat is part of New York Theater Workshop's virtual programming, which is all offered free to the entire New York Theater Workshop community, which includes you. If you are in a position to support our work, we hope you would consider donating. You will find a link to donate in the chat on Facebook, or the chat on Zoom, or the comments on Facebook. So our conversation today is going to be about an hour. For the first 45 minutes, you'll hear from Claire and Teniece, and then we will open it up to Q&A. You can ask any questions you have in the Q&A feature on Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. If someone has asked a question that you also are interested in, you can upvote it on Zoom or like it on Facebook, and we'll do our very best to get to all the questions in the time that we have. So I'm going to share abbreviated bios of our guests. Claire Warden is an intimacy director and coordinator, fight director, teacher, and actress whose work has been seen across America and the UK. Claire works as an intimacy coordinator and consultant on numerous television productions and recently made history as the first intimacy director on Broadway with Frankie and Johnny in the Claire de Lune, as well as working on many other theatrical productions. Teniece Divya Johnson is a stunt performer and certified intimacy coordinator and director for television, film, and stage. Some of Teniece's credits include HBO's Succession, FX's Pose, West Side Story, directed by Steven Spielberg, and the limited series The Underground Railroad, written and directed by Barry Jenkins. And of course, both Claire and Teniece were intimacy directors on Slave Play at New York Theater Workshop and on Broadway, and we are so happy to have them here in conversation today. So Claire and Teniece, welcome.
Oh!
Yay!
Yeah.
Hello.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to leave you, and I will be here and see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, my friend.
Greetings.
How are you? Hello, everybody out there that's joining us as well. It feels strange. I should speak into the camera when I talk to everybody out there. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is a fireside chat, and we're just gonna have a chat, right? I guess.
Yeah.
One thing we wanted to say as we talk, if we if we say something that is unclear to you, or you want to clarify something, or we go off into technical language that isn't clear, please feel free to ask a question, a clarifying question in the chat, and then Rachel's going to read that, pop on in, and ask us to clarify anything we talk about as we go. Apart from that, we're going to chat and go like that. That's it.
Fantastic. Claire, is it
Yes.
cool if I ask you a question to start it off?
My goodness, go ahead.
Fantastic. So I think we've seen a lot of articles about intimacy direction and kind of giving an idea of what intimacy direction is. I'm wondering if you can complete the sentence, intimacy direction is not. Just as another point of view, right? Because sometimes we can identify, we can put words to things. And in my experience, it's also helpful sometimes to say what something isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think there's a lot of not knowing what it isn't. What it's not, it is not part of HR. It is not the health and safety police. It's not the consent police. It's not the moral headmistress who's come to tell you that you're doing naughty things and it's very rude and you shouldn't. Even though sometimes I may sound like that. That's the opposite of what we do. It's not checking up on and catching out directors and actors, right? I feel that a lot sometimes when we begin a process or a conversation with someone that hasn't worked with an intimacy director before, there's an anxiety that we're just waiting for them to do the wrong thing and pounce, or that we're there to overrule a director or an actor or a producer when they get it wrong. And it's the opposite with, I feel like I'm there to support the directors and the actors, and bring an amount of knowledge and very specialized skill and kind of developed craft to facilitate an enlightened process, I think. Right?
Yeah.
What about for you? What are the things that's
Well,
not for you?
just to build off what you're saying, I think sometimes I'm asked the question, what kind of resistance do you get? Like, how hard is it for you? And what I just want to remind people is that everyone we meet is somewhere on their journey of hurt to healing. It's a spectrum, like many things in life. And I try to remind people that everyone on set and everyone on this stage didn't take these courses. They haven't studied the things that I've studied. They're not here for a master's class. Right. They are here to accomplish their job, to make their day. And they need to know what it is I do on set. How we are able to contribute to the vision and support the storytelling as designers, as coordinators. And I'm really thankful to, all my colleagues that have trained so hard to get to a point where there's an opportunity. I lost that. It'll come back.
Well, you said something about colleagues that I really love the generosity you have with that attitude of like they didn't come to take a master's in this, that's not their job, and that's why we're there, and that it's okay to not know everything about it, because I know absolutely very, very little about lighting, right? That's why there's a lighting designer, right? Otherwise, you'd get a lot of blue and some sparkles, and you'd get on and off, and that's probably it, right? Which would look kind of like my living room looks, but probably not appropriate for a play. And I think that's really useful for me to remember as an intimacy director, like to keep that open generosity. But I think really important for everyone in the industry, because yes, there's a lot of calling to do better, to do right, to be the enlightened people. But that takes time, and we all have our parts to play, and we all play them to the best of our ability, and then we have a symphony, right?
Absolutely. I think I have a remnant of my previous thought.
Good.
I think the other thing too is sometimes we're fearful of the unknown. And the more we're able to articulate the role we play, I know a lot of times when I'm on set, or people even hear the title intimacy director, and there's always a reaction, right, Claire?
Yeah.
It's never neutral.
Yeah.
Never neutral. It's something like, or like, tell me more.
Or just a freeze. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I also find the fact that sometimes that fear and maybe resistance or whatever feelings they are towards this subject is because us as a society, we don't really talk about intimacy. And here we are now in a workplace trying to create a vision, and we don't necessarily have all the tools so that we can feel really good about it.
Yeah.
So it takes that teamwork. And you know, productions allowing space for new tools, especially for veteran performers, veteran directors, right? Here we are again, we're in the process and we're like, hey, here's some new information that we think can be helpful on this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, what I think what can be challenging about that is that it's becoming broader and updating all the time. Like we are still, Lou and me and our colleagues are still refining the practice and learning what works in this situation as opposed to that situation, right? We're still responding to the introduction of this. And so, you know, it takes time to even craft what it is, let alone everybody else to come on board with that. And yeah, and what you said about resistance, you know, some people have heard me say this before. For me, I believe that resistance is the covering or the presentation of either fear or hurt or both, right? And that when we go like head to head with resistance, we're never going to get anywhere, like at any point in life, right? If you just go head to head with the resistance, you just become like two bulls. But if we can see the fear and the hurt that's underneath that resistance and engage generously with that, and I think personally as an individual, as well as like intimacy directors, if I can be willing to, oh, there comes some, I'm resistant to that. What's that about? What's underneath that? To kind of learn how I want to move forward in it.
Absolutely. To me, that sounds like you're talking about compassionate leadership.
Beautifully put. Yeah.
Right. In the sense that everything is not from here. A lot of times it's from a heart space. And some of the tools that help me do this work and that I really try to focus on and center on are things like compassion, which for me really starts from non-judgment. And why? That is an awesome tool for me, because judgment leads to creating distance between people. And if we want to collaborate, if we want to create something, we have to connect. And the only way that's going to work is if I'm compassionate and that light just shines indiscriminately. Like I don't get to pick and choose who it goes on.
Right.
And I've also found that compassion has to also radiate to myself. When I'm in a space, and I've done this same exercise all the time, and I get some feedback in the room. I think we use the term called in.
Yeah.
Right? I'm called in. And of course, my ego is going to pop up and it's going to say, but this is the best idea ever. And I'm going to whack that mole, right? And then move on to the next thing, which is an invitation of compassion. Like, relieving myself of the responsibility to be right, to be an expert. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to introduce new tools and to commune and connect with the people in the room. We're all going to start where we are, and hopefully we'll do a little bit more if that's something that's comfortable and we're willing to do.
Yeah. Are there situations or types of people that you find it more challenging to let go of that judgment or to allow that compassion to come out?
Honestly, no. I'm kind of like a bleeding heart. I felt like an other a lot in a lot of spaces, whether it's being like too black, too loud, too angry, too demonstrative, which just means the illustration of emotions, right? But it has such a negative connotation. So I really try to be understanding in that sense. I'm not perfect, right? I think if anything, sometimes I want to be right, but who wants to be right and alone? So the thought pops up and I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll compromise. That sounds like a much better approach. Do you have some reflections on that question you just posed?
I think so. I'm kind of, it's wearing in my head since I asked it, and I'm sure I do. It kind of makes me think, I'm trying to get at it from another way, that I realized a while ago that sometimes I get really plugged in by people. When I say plugged in, I mean like, like a strong reaction that comes, boom, about something, whether it's joy or anger or whatever.
Yeah.
And I used to get really kind of critical of where I saw what I judged to be a weakness, and looking at that, realizing that it was always something that I was afraid of being myself. Like I had judgments upon myself being, or fear about, the effect of that on me or in my life. And so it was this kind of defensive judgment, because I was like, if I judge that, then I couldn't possibly be that. So I don't know. I wonder if, often I will have the space in my mind, but not always, to go, oh, I'm getting quite plugged in by this resistance or whatever, or I'm finding it hard to be compassionate, and I need to do that work of what's plugging me in here. What is it that I see that I'm afraid of, maybe?
Claire, I thank you for your vulnerability and courage and even articulating that. And it's so true, because I don't think we can get to any level of compassion until we see ourselves in things that kind of rub us the wrong way.
Yes.
What is it about me that's not vibing with this situation? And that internal reflection, and such a necessary part of the process.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You stated that really, really well.
Thanks. I mean, I think it's part of our training, right? As intimacy directors, that self-knowledge, that, we call it emotional fitness, but that ability to be willing to look at ourselves, or to know thyself, right? To know ourselves, and to be able to eloquently observe ourselves, so that we can catch those reactions as they come. And sometimes it's, I don't know what that is. Shut that down, put it away. I'll have to look at that tonight. I've got to do my job. And sometimes,
definitely.
Right. Sometimes we're like, and I'm going to be calling Teniece and raving about that for 20 minutes as soon as this day is done. Right. And sometimes I can be very zen in the moment.
Something just sparked in that conversation that you were saying. So I believe all of our work is a reflection of our inner work. With that, I have non-binary pronouns. That's how I like to present myself. And it's made me really examine this whole idea of good and bad. And this binary approach to life that, like, it's either one or it's the other. Because what I've found is, again, life, living on this spectrum. And the complications with that is, if I label something bad or someone bad, all one color, I'm not really able to respond appropriately with my relationship to that material. One of the things that comes up, I'm reading this great book now, it's called Me and White Supremacy. And
yes.
Yeah, and it talks about our reluctance as a community, like racism, for instance. Like, white supremacy it's an inherited thing. It's social constructs, it's institutions built in this. But if we label like racist or bad,
yes,
we're never going to engage in the complicated conversations. We just don't want to be bad. We want nothing to do with it.
Right.
And that ignorance does not change what's happening in the room or the space.
Right. Right. Because there's nowhere to go, right? If there's only two options, there's nowhere to go. And if it's too far, if it feels too far to get from bad to good, I don't know if I'll make that journey, so I won't even try.
And
right?
bless their hearts, because there are real people with real feelings and real opinions and real life experiences.
Yeah. And it's amazing, isn't it, how nuanced our work in creativity is, like as in theater or film, or when we're creating plays and films and TVs, right? The consideration of the storytelling is so nuanced, right? And the characters being created are, we want them to be as 3D fully formed characters as possible, right? With all these lives, and we can play, the serial killer, and we can play their hurt and their beauty and their vulnerability, right? But when it comes to us or other people, we're like, no, you're bad and you're good, because I suppose it's a lot more in work, or it's less neat.
It's definitely messy, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of playing Thing Jenga in New York. It's a game I like, where you take all your things out and you reorganize them. But there's a point in that journey where you look into your room like, oh no, I'm in too deep. Like, yes. I just want to lay down.
Right.
That's what it reminds me of, right? That inner work too. Sometimes we have to dig at things that don't feel good in order to get to another place of understanding.
And so I guess we as IDs or ICs are kind of facilitators of it's funny, right? Because we're facilitators of the conversation in the room, right? Or on the set, or in the meetings, and I think kind of stealthily alongside that, I've found is often sparked the conversations of or the personal reflections on, so how do I do my craft now, right? As an actor, as a director, how do I do my craft with this kind of additional consideration that I might not have had before? So whilst, we facilitate that, but we're not the therapists and we're not the, the life coaches that have come in to make you all better people. We're the crafts people that facilitate the conversations, right?
And hi, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
I'm popping in because we're getting, this is really wonderful, and we're getting some excellent questions, a lot of which I'll save to the end, but some are hitting on sort of what you're touching on right now.
Great.
So I wonder about sort of what any specifics of like how you would approach a task that is that might come up, or a question of like what does a structure look like of what someone might ask you to do, and how you are introduced to a group, and sort of some like nuts and bolts, a lot of questions about sort of the nuts and bolts of what does it look like to what does a day look like for you both as an intimacy director. And I wonder if this might be a good moment to sort of dive into that a little.
Yeah, sure. Well, I like that for me. So there's kind of, I talk about this a lot. There's 3 prongs, right, to our work. There's the advocacy for the actors. So it's having those conversations with actors, performers, knowing what their consent boundaries are so that we can advocate for them on set, right? There's the conversations with the creatives, right? The writers, if they're there, the directors, the DP, if it's on set, on what we're creating, or what the scene will look like, what we're wanting and how that fits in. And then there's like the craft part of like the actual technical choreographing or creating or supporting of the creating of what actually happens in the scene. Sometimes that's really, on stage, like in Slave Play, for example, there was some very specific choreography, like we created, because there was some very intense stories of sexual violence that were quite complex and that we created them. Sometimes it's a little looser. But it's that kind of helping the facilitating. Once we know the director's part, the actor's contribution, then it's like facilitating that. Oh, look, my hands are way too close to the camera. It's bad Zoom etiquette. It's the kind of facilitating of that. Yeah. Right, Teniece?
I think that's great.
Absolutely.
Great.
I'm going to pop out and I'll come back later.
Bye. Can I ask you a question now? Oh, go. What?
Lost it. You go.
Okay, well, it'll come back. So this is something that we were actually talking about. What I want to kind of ask it with everybody here, so that they can hear it. But just about if you would, and I think this can be both about intimacy direction or coordination as a whole, or like individually. If you would share something that you learned from your colleagues this year or recently, in the not too distant past, that you'd be willing to share with us.
Yeah, I wanna share something. I think I believe this in my heart and learn from my colleagues that we need to continue to decolonize the narrative of intimacy direction and honor those that have forged new ground without the assistance of an organization. Specifically, someone that comes to mind is Sasha Smith. Like, she was one of the first coordinators in Chicago to work at Steppenwolf, the Goodman, Writers Theater, Virginia Stage, and multiple of Chicago's storefronts. And I think sometimes when I think it goes back to being right. Sometimes we want to come up with our own way and we're like, this is the way. And if you don't do it this way, you got to go. But I think we really need to honor the legacy of this work that existed before it was unnamed. And even when it did have a name, I know Sasha personally, and her journey started in 2013, right? This is before the Me Too movement, right? So she was in spaces helping to create this language. And what I learned from her is that we owe it to ourselves to really investigate the story. Specifically, I'm thinking of like media coverage. I've seen a lot of news stories about intimacy coordination, and I gotta say, not many of them have big hair and brown skin. And like after a while, when you start to see these images in the media, you start thinking like, oh, this is really cool, but like it doesn't belong to people that look like me. And I think it's an interesting balance, right? Because this work requires some humility. It's an act of service, holding space. And also, if you don't talk about your accomplishments, if you don't push that narrative, it's possible that you'll be left out. And we're talking like erasure here. Like, we're not just talking like I stepped on someone's toe. We're talking about like people's like life's work here. So I love my colleagues because of their experience, training, dedication to the craft, and their willingness to connect with me and to teach me more. So I can be an opportunity. I can be in instances and think like, oh, I have more perspectives. Let me lean into that Sasha vibe, or oh, let me lean into my Alicia right now.
We could all do the leaning into
these
our
energies. Or let me even like think of Colleen. You know, she's out in Philly, and she's gonna, the way she approaches the work with such sensitivity to trauma.
Mm.
So many things, Claire. Oh, you got something to share on that? I think it's really important that people know that we're not out here doing this work by ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, we're connected. Is there something that you wanted to share about your community of colleagues and what you've learned from them?
Well, I mean, yes, echoing like what you just talked about, and a very steep learning curve on making space, and what you said earlier about expert, you know, it's funny because a lot of people look to me, I think all intimacy directors, to have the knowledge, to be the expert, to fix it, you know, like just to fix, to make it better, to there's a lot of anxiety about doing it wrong, or did I do it wrong in the past, or will I do it wrong now? And I think that person might want to do it wrong and just fix and save, right? Which has been, you know, what I've had to learn. And I think I've learned it amazingly from my colleagues, and some in particular, I think, you know, Jessica Steinrock and Alicia Roders, and you, in fact, about the, about about guiding without having to be the expert, right? Of holding the space without holding the power. And about, and for, you know, me personally, and we're all going to get a little personal now. You know, like intellectual prowess from my culture and how I grew up, intellectual prowess was given enormous credit. And because I have fear around abandonment, right? If I have a habit of, if I am not indispensable, maybe they're gonna leave me, or maybe they're not gonna need me anymore, right? So this human want to be there and fix and you know, just become indispensable. And it comes also from like being an actress, you know, and that career is, I'm going to swear now, apologies if it's offensive, but it's fucking hard, right? Because will you ever get that job? If you get the job, will you get the next one? Like, there's a constant fear of it getting pulled away from you. And then in a new industry, and like we're creating something, and will that get taken away? And so learning that, for me, learning how to find that, not having to know or fix, but knowing how to get to the answer, but I don't have to provide it, I think.
Claire.
There's a clarifying question that came in that that asked if you could describe what you mean by holding the space.
Yes, thank you, because I talk about that a lot. When I talk about holding the space, it means with my energy and my presence and my attention, right? That I can sit with and be open to and accepting without judgment of whatever feelings or thoughts or stories are coming up in people. And I mean, for me, it feels physical. Like I literally have my arms around the room, right? And I'm like, whatever comes up, it's okay. We've got it. You get to be you, human, and I will ensure and guide you through it, right? And if I will encourage you if you need encouraging, and if it gets too much, I'll know that, and I'll help you come out of that, or I'll just sit and be with your feelings. Teniece, do you have other ways to describe holding the space?
That's wonderful. And I would like to hold space by going back to what you just offered in the space about those strong feelings of leadership and that responsibility. I want to acknowledge and and just bring up the fact that I don't think we realize how hard it is being at the front line of something that's new sometimes. Because when we get a call, it's not always like, can you choreograph this? It's kind of like everything's gone wrong.
So often.
We have so many systemic issues. We've got years of things we haven't talked about. Come fix it all. So Claire, I just want to say thank you for going into the unknown, into these spaces, and trying to navigate and I think a lot of our colleagues do this. Eventually, I'm hoping in 10 years or sooner, right? A lot of that emotional labor of the work doesn't exist, and that we're able to do more of the coordinating, but that we've taught so many younger generations that they have these tools, they're able to speak in this space about their language and consent and incorporate it into the flow of their workspace, that, you know, we're getting calls that for work and more healings. I'm seeing in the queue that we have lots of great questions in the space. I want to say thank you for everyone. This is a really interesting medium, and I got really entranced and my friend and colleague here. So thank you for keeping us aware.
Yeah, there are many wonderful questions. Maybe I'll just start pulling some.
Go ahead.
And also, we have some questions that have come in, and also we can utilize, there's a raise your hand feature. If anybody's interested in asking a live question, we can try to toggle back and forth and do a few of those. But to start, a lot of folks are asking about training and how you trained in intimacy direction, also how you could get certified, and if there are any texts or other things you would recommend to folks who are really interested in learning more about becoming intimacy directors.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that, and just like to be really efficient with time, that there's a great information about, if you want to train on, there's a couple of organizations out there, right, that train. There's IDC, Intimacy Directions Coordinators, right, which Teniece and I are part of. And if you go onto their website, it'll tell you all how to train it, and it'll give you suggested resources. There's TIE, which is Theatrical Intimacy Education. I believe they have information on their website as well about training or learning the craft. So jump on those websites, first of all, to get that information. What else I will add on that is that, you know, we come from the industry, and we have a lot of that background. It's slightly different, but it's all many years of industry-based background. And you need that to do this work. And you need, honestly, I think you need a lot of life experience, right? And I think you need, you know, some understanding of consent. Like go on the websites, have a look. Should tell you all you need to know.
And there's a follow-up to this question, which is wondering if you feel that it's important to be certified in order to do this work.
You do not have the right to practice on human beings. The opportunity for causing harm is way too great to just label yourself something, take a weekend course, and then start teaching this.
It's a great answer. Thank you. Also, a number of questions wondering about your process of collaborating together and what that's like, and on Slave Play, which we're getting a lot of love for here, but if you were willing to talk about that experience, or just working together in general and what it's like to collaborate in this way.
Claire, do you mind if I pop
No, go,
off?
please.
First and foremost, I want to say it's really rare that you can have two directors in one space. So the fact that New York Theater Workshop provided us with that opportunity, and then we got to do it again, is really special. It's really special. I think in the room, I like working with Claire. She surprises me. I learn stuff in the space that's new to me and larger extensions of her person. And we figured out a really great way to communicate in the space that was like kind of seamless. I'm pretty impressed. I was like jotting down notes, and because here's the thing, like someone has to hold the space, right? And that has to stay constant. So you can't like pass a baton or drop it, things like that. It can't work like that. And we don't have the moment to be like, hey, Claire and Teniece, check in. Like, it doesn't work like that. Like, so you really have to find a rhythm that supports the work, supports what's happening in the space, and supports the people in the space specifically to their needs.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think even if you're there doing the same job, you're not the same people, right? And I learned, I could see really quickly, like where Teniece really shines, like has so much, sees things that I don't necessarily see, or has a different way of approaching things. And that just makes the partnership work stronger, so that you have a whole other person, right? Who is watching and having ideas and thinking and has knowledge and understanding that I don't, and vice versa. So that it's merely an advantage, right? It doesn't, just because you're working together doesn't mean you have to divide the time, the attention space. You can double everything.
There's a number of questions about the world that we're in now and the Zoom world, and how might this work translate into this medium, and how you can apply the principles and ideas of intimacy direction to a space where maybe there's no physical intimacy, but there's still intimate content about what is being addressed or produced, or how folks are working together.
It's okay, maybe I'll say two things about that. Well, I got asked a while ago by a friend whose teacher friend had contacted them and said they have two students who happen to be quarantining together. Can they intimacy direct them over Zoom? To which I didn't think is responsible or necessary. I'm like, you just do something else. Choose a different scene. Do it representationally. I think I get. I'm an artist, right? I get how much we want to try and preserve what we had in a world where it's taken it away from us. And I think we have to consistently check in with our wants balanced with the consequences, the costs, the effect of it, right? I think if we're talking about not physical contact, God, I think the whole world needs to be having the conversation, the understanding of how to make a space, whether it's a virtual space or a real space, that is equitable and that is one of equity, not equality. When I say equitable, that is inclusive, that is considerate of people's different needs, and is willing to stay in conversation around difficult, uncomfortable topics. So I think that learning about those, how to do those things, learning about those 4 subjects, will be very useful both for Zoom and when we get back into the room together.
Yeah, and I think other great things to practice in this time are non-judgment, compassion, as we're all in a period of time of not knowing how to respond to things. And it's going to change, and it's going to be okay. And we don't necessarily have the answers now, But I think conversations about consent and boundaries are real things that we are practicing, right? Whether people are deciding on how they leave their house or how they get their groceries. So when I think of this work on Zoom, I think of the hard work Claire's talking about, the opportunity to talk about comfort level, discomfort, remembering that we can bend but not necessarily break with conversation, and that there are some tools out there, and Claire's listed, some websites, that some organizations that have these tools that might facilitate in these spaces, period. Although I went up.
We have a hand raised. Would you like to take a live question?
Why not?
Okay.
Yes.
So, Kimia Corwin, I am going to offer to turn your mic on, and then you have to accept, and then you can ask a question live.
I'm so sorry. I think that was an accident.
Oh, Kimia, see, now you have to come up with the best question you could
It's
possibly
okay.
think of.
We have 2 more hands, so we'll see you
Right,
later.
anyway.
Okay,
Thanks
we have
for being with us.
hands now. This is really exciting. So, you're next. I'm going to unmute you.
Who is this? Say your name again. I missed the name as well.
Am I unmuted? It's Kay Bevan-Ayers.
Hi, Kay.
You are unmuted.
Hi. I had a question about dealing with mental and emotional fatigue, especially as we all start to go back to work and we're dealing with the trauma of this global pandemic. How much time on like a rehearsal basis do you ask to do in kind of one sitting? How much do you pre and post in the space, and how is that going to change moving forward?
It's a great question. I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot and having thoughts and conversations about. I think it's going to be individual to the rooms and the participants, and it's going to depend on, everyone's been through a different journey, and still is going through different journeys. I think the most important thing is being willing to name it and to speak it, that, we're, as and when we get to go to our first rehearsal, for example, we're going to be, even if it's a 2-person show, right, with stage management and director and maybe the writer, like that's more people than our body's been in a room with probably for however long it'll be, 9 months maybe, we don't know. And just that in itself is going to vibrate so strongly. I'm currently looking at putting together like some guidelines or something as to how to work our way through that process. But I think for me, I think it's going to have to be individual to those people in that room, right? And that we're making those, we're having those conversations, making those guidelines individually, right? And we get to say, okay, what is it when someone really needs a break? What are we going to do about that, right? Even if it's before our time. Are we going to try doing, an hour at a time and see how we go? I don't think we can prescribe, because we don't know how long it'll be. I think if we went back now, that would be different than if we go back in 3 months' time, if we go back in 6 months' time. Because the accumulation of this will have an effect. So I think conversation.
And I also wonder if it'll impact the stories we want to tell after this. Like, I'm sure there's intimacy, because the definition of intimacy is like familiarity or closeness, right? So we have a level of intimacy with everyone in our lives. So it's not like intimacy is dead or anything like that, but I guess I just wonder, I just wonder what it'll look like. And I feel like, Claire, it depends on what's in the room and what everyone's dealing with. And there is a ripple effect. So we went from like trying to have a closed set or a safe space. Now we're going to have, as Claire said, a room full of people. And now this is the work environment and the question of safety, trust and safe space. And then those question marks just keep getting larger and larger to our communities, our commute home, our houses, you know, so compassion, non-judgment, providing tools for verbal checkouts and gestures that are able to let us know where you are in the process, because we might have a hard time articulating what it is that we're feeling at the time. So the more tools that we can put in the space, I think that will determine how you manage a situation. I would say probably err on more time for everything in this process, if that's a luxury we can afford.
It's
Great
just
question.
just to jump off your point, Teniece, about like what stories we're going to tell. I do think that, especially when it comes to intimacy, this is it's gonna really, like, I think, help us really think about the impact of intimacy. Right? I went to the bagel shop last week, right, and I went to pick up the bag of bagels, right, and I'd given my card to the person behind the counter, and as he gave it back to me, our fingers like touched, right, and that was the first person, apart from my beloved, that I have touched like physically for 2 months, right? And I was like, ah, right? It was terrifying, and it was incredibly exciting, and I suddenly felt like I was in the middle of a period drama, right? He touched my finger, I don't even know him, right? But it does make me think that that even that tiny touch of a finger was electric, right? And can we really, maybe this will like give us opportunity to step back and really look at what physical intimacy is and can be, because knowing that our audiences will also have been through this isolation, so the impact of them seeing that will change. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Do you want to take another live question?
Yeah.
Let's do it. One more live one. Anna Lass, I'm going to unmute you. Are you with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Anna,
we can hear
hi.
you.
Hi, oh my God, thank you so much for making the time. This is so enlightening. I posted the question in the Q&A, but it was basically because I've been working as like a runner and a production assistant on mostly film sets, but sometimes in theater. And I've witnessed, I don't know if this is because the field is just like so male dominated or something, but you witness like a lot of abuse in a lot of forms. And I was just wondering if there's like, I as a PA or a runner, whenever I would see this happening, I feel like I couldn't really speak up because it would like compromise my chances in the industry or something. But like, and especially since most of the abuse was being doled down by like people who were either the director or either the talent. So I was wondering if you've ever like witnessed that and kind of found a way to navigate that.
Teniece, do you want to take that?
Oh.
Sorry, it's kind of a heavy question.
No,
No,
thank you. It's
not
an
at
important
all.
one.
I want to say I'm sorry that that's happening. I'm sorry that you watched that and felt like you weren't in a position to say anything. And I do want to acknowledge, I say this to anyone when they're being advocates or allies, you got to do a risk assessment in the space, right? This is a marathon, change is a marathon. So we don't want you putting yourselves in situations of danger. And I guess I can also speak generally about working on sets. There's an anti-harassment meeting that everyone should have attended, and a phone number, an anonymous phone number for each production. These are some of the resources that are provided. I would also say it's hard changing an industry. So if that's a small contribution that you can make, reporting it, it might be a drop in the bucket towards change. I know I've been on sets where I've witnessed stuff, even in meetings, gaslighting and misogyny, and I've had to take it to the producers later. And what they did with it at that point is, you know, that's a production matter. It's out of my hands. I don't know. That's not my department. So I feel terrible as to not have like a full complete answer, because it would depend on each set you're on. Claire, do you have?
Yeah, absolutely echoing that. And it's also very hard to kind of hold that yourself and, you know, be like, oh, I didn't know what to do. I didn't do anything. And to take, like, to feel the feelings, the guilt and the pain and the shame of that. When absolutely it is about like your risk assessment, but anyone that you trust to talk to about it, will help you. And might give you ideas or resources, or they might be someone that could be like, I might talk to this person, or I will go there. One thing I will say that really helped me was doing a bystander intervention training course, just because it gave me like, okay, there's the five things I can do. What can I do? The 5 Ds, right? And I could pick one. And I was like, yeah, bystander training, it doesn't work. What do you do? But then I took a course, and it just gave me options each time that I get to be able to quickly go, right, what could I do? I'm doing something. There is a wonderful, this is one that I took that I personally recommend, which is a company called Hollaback, Hollaback. And they offer bystander training intervention on their website. And you can just go, it's free. And it just gave me some tools to be like, I have somewhere to go, to be like, okay, I did this one, right? Even if one of their tools is just, once it's over, to go up and say, hey, I saw that. Are you okay? Do you want me to walk with you? Do you want me to sit here with you? Anything that, you know, do you want me to, you know, what can I do to help you, right? So that might give you some tools as well to help.
Thank you so
That
much.
compassionate response versus, you know, trying to get into punishment or judgment or justice, because we need healing all over. Great question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
You're muted, Rachel.
I was muted. I think maybe we have time for 1 or 2 more.
Okay.
I guess I'm going to call some of these Q&A questions that have come in. A lot have come in about advice you might have for folks in educational settings, and how to incorporate this work in youth theater with high schoolers in college, maybe in settings where whether or not bringing in an intimacy director is an option, how to start, what advice you would have for folks in educational settings.
So I think consent, agency, respect and inclusivity should be part of interaction with people from the moment they're born, right? And teaching young people about consent and agency and respect when it comes to bodies, whether that be in personal life or in plays. So I think that's important. I think that's important as an educator to learn how to support and facilitate that. I would also say, you know, I think as an educator, I think part of an educator's job, duty, when working performers with young people is to really carefully consider the material that you're working with and you're assigning, and why, right? And do you need to assign that play with and do the full brothel scene with lap dance with 14 and 15-year-olds? Do you need to do that, right? Is it responsible to do that? Is it serving them as people as well as drama students, right? And are you fully confident and equipped to facilitate that in a healthy way? And if not, there's 1,000 ways to tell a story, right? So you can shift things around. Yeah, I think those are off the top of my head like immediate responses to that. And, you know, education is like, oh, that's where we can really like set people up for the rest of their life and therefore the rest of our industry, right? The people, the kids that are doing their high school plays now, or when they get back to school, right, will be running the industry in 15 years time, 20 years time, right? So if we can support them and instill in them this understanding now, then it's just going to become so much more efficient, and it's just going to become so much more natural as our industry moves forward.
And I just want to add, if we're talking about consent, it doesn't work unless it includes intersectionality. If we're not considering race, if we're not talking about gender norms, if we're not having those same care and concerns across the board, you are not creating a safe space.
Mm. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I feel like that's actually a good note maybe to end on, thinking about the future of, I love thinking about the high schoolers doing theater are going to be running it all, and that's so true.
They will. They'll be running New York Theater workshops. They'll be on Broadway. They'll be in the plays, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's going to be exciting too, because like, if, you know, we know the youth, they know what they want. They're the ones speaking up about their identity and their experiences and what they need. It's going to be super exciting, because I'm finding a lot of times it's the younger generation that's wanting that I don't know, that to unfold and to be less defined and confined. They want to start telling you how it is, and in a space to move. And that's also because there have been advocates and people that have suffered to give them that sort of sense that like, that's even possible, right? Yeah. Sorry, Rachel, I cut you off.
No, please, I love it. Well, thank you both so much. This was a fantastic hour, and I just want to thank everybody who's with us. I'm going to make a couple plugs for upcoming programs and conversations. Tomorrow, Thursday the 21st at 7 p.m. we have a virtual open mic night. The theme is reimagining community, connection, and creation. On Friday, we have a talk at 4 o'clock, teaching theater online, trauma-informed pedagogy. And next Wednesday, the fireside chat is with NYTW's Director of Education, Alex Santiago Hidao, in conversation with International Theater of the Oppressed practitioner, Julian Boal. So we have a lot of really wonderful things coming up. Please join us. You can find the full roster at nytw.org. This fireside chat and all of the workshops' virtual programming is free and offered to anybody who is with us. All of the artists are compensated, and we're continuing to pay our staff. So if you are in a position to support, there is no donation too small or too big. So we'll drop a link in the chat if you are able. $5, $10, $25, really whatever. Your support will help us in this moment and beyond. So thank you so much. We're also going to drop a survey in the chat, and that will also get sent out in a post conversation email, and we would love to hear from you about this program and others, and just how we can all remain in community right now. So that's my spiel. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much, Teniece and Claire.
Thank you everybody for tuning and listening to us chat.
Yeah, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Peace.